Ever wondered what would happen if two conjoined twins couldn't survive attached to each other? In this video I'll be telling the story of the conjoined twins whose separation meant murdering the weaker twin. In the distant dark past of the year 2000, when everybody was jamming to Millennium and raising 8-bit pets on their Tamagotchis, two babies who were given the legal pseudonyms Mary and Jodie were born to a Maltese couple from the island of Gozo. This was no ordinary birth, however, as Mary and Jodie were born with their bodies fused together, an incredibly rare condition known as conjoined or Siamese twins that is estimated to affect anywhere between 1 in 50 to 1 in 189,000 births across the world. To take advantage of the United Kingdom's world-leading experts, the parents had travelled from Malta to the UK in preparation for the birth after learning that the twins were conjoined. This proved to be a life-saving decision, as Mary and Jodie's birth was one of the most complicated births in recent history. On August 8th, 2000, the babies were born. They were completely joined at the lower abdomen near the hips, and when laid on their back they looked like a long trunk with a head and arms on either end. In the centre of their shared body, their spine was fused and their legs crisscrossed one another. Jodie, the healthier of the two twins, was born with a strong heart, good limb control, and a mental awareness that was as good as other newborn children. So, basically, Jodie was a healthy child. In Mary's case, there was a very small response from her cardiopulmonary system before it failed. Although Mary could move her limbs and had opened one of her eyes, the specialist medical team assembled to help the twins soon realised that Mary's heart and lungs were so underdeveloped that she was relying entirely on her sister Jodie for oxygen and blood flow. To put it bluntly, Mary was incapable of living without relying on Jodie, and Jodie's heart could only beat for two for so long. Doctors estimated that the twins had about 6 months to survive in their current state, and advised the parents that if Jodie was separated from Mary, she could survive and live a normal life. However, this would, tragically, mean killing Mary in the process. Mary's mother and father were now facing an incredibly difficult moral choice that no parent should ever have to make. Do they kill one of their children to save the other? For the greater good. They were devout Catholics though, and they were not prepared to agree to the ending of Mary's life, even though they knew it meant saving Jodie's. Notwithstanding their views, the issue was brought before the Court of Appeal in England, the country's second highest court, to determine whether it was legal to kill Mary for Jodie's sake. If you've seen my previous video on the shipwrecked sailors who killed and ate the cabin boy to survive while lost at sea, you may recall that killing somebody out of necessity to save the life of another was not accepted as a defence to murder there. The judge in that case was not interested in arguments for the greater good. And so those sailors were sentenced to death for what they did, although they were pardoned by the Crown. The doctors knew this and so sought permission from the courts before separating the girls. The issue presented to the judges was a simple one. As Lord Justice Ward put it, save Jodie but murder Mary. This put the court in a very tricky spot. You see, the doctors and the judges all seemed to want to save Jodie, and the utilitarians among us would almost certainly favour separating the twins. After all, why should both children die instead of one? Why should poor Jodie, a healthy young child who has her whole life ahead of her, be left to die because of the sad, unavoidable circumstances surrounding her birth? These arguments resonated with the British public at the time, and I think it's fair to say that most people felt that the separation had to happen to save Jodie. But, on the flip side, doing so would make murderers out of the doctors and arguably even the judges. The medical team were intentionally and purposefully using their expertise to kill Mary. The judges were giving permission for a baby to be murdered in the interests of the greater good. The then Archbishop of Westminster, Cormac Murphy O'Connor, made submissions before the court in an attempt to dissuade the judges from allowing the surgery to go ahead. He made a number of points, the meat and potatoes of his argument being that human life is sacred, that is inviolable, so that one should never aim to cause an innocent person's death by act or omission. Basically, it's never ever okay to kill somebody, whether by act or by not acting at all, and there are no exceptions to this rule. This was the stance of the Roman Catholic Church, and it was the parents' stance as well, given their Catholic beliefs. In the end, the Court of Appeal ruled that the separation should go ahead. Interestingly, the judges had different ways of thinking. One judge, Lord Justice Ward, thought that the actions of the doctors could be excused on the grounds of self-defence. He argued that Mary was effectively attacking her sister by sapping her strength, and that if Jodie could speak, she would ask Mary to stop killing her. I'm honestly not a fan of this at all, as I think it's in poor taste to say that Mary was attacking her sister and that Jodie needed to be defended by the doctors. I mean, saying that somebody's very birth is an attack on somebody else is pretty grim. Another judge, Lord Justice Brooke, compared this situation to that of the stranded sailors who ate the cabin boy and excused the actions of the doctors on the grounds of necessity. According to him, the two big issues that worried the judge back in 1884, the questions of who decides whose life is more valuable and who decides when something like this is necessary, weren't relevant in Mary's situation. Fate has tragically ordained that Mary is destined for a short life. Her heart, brain and lungs were practically useless, and if she hadn't been fortunate enough to be attached to Jodie, she would have already died. In short, nobody has to pick who needs to die and why. The decision is out of everybody's hands. The 20-hour surgery went ahead on November 7th, 2000, and, as expected, Mary died. Jodie survived the operation, and despite needing substantial reconstructive surgery to her lower abdomen, she made an incredible recovery. According to an article from the Malta Times in August 2020, Gracie Attard, Jodie's real name, which was revealed at the request of her parents after the surgery, is 20 years old and living a happy life in Malta. She wants to become a doctor herself now. The remains of Rosie Attard, Mary's real name, are buried on the island of Gozo where the family live. The ethical and legal dilemmas created by this case sparked global discussion, with advocates both for and against the separation of the twins making their voices heard. What do you think? If you were the judge, would you have allowed the doctors to separate them? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and enable notifications to catch more interesting real cases.